Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to play some arcade games that came to the Atari, and I was there. I was there in the arcades, and I had an Atari. About this time in my life, I would have been, pushing the 8 to 11-year-old mark for most of these games. So I can tell you with great honesty if these games, when they came home, were pretty good or not. So starting off with Battlezone. And I mean, this doesn't look anything obviously like the futuristic look of the one in the arcade with the wire mesh 3D look. But having said that, this is a really great looking version on the Atari, and it handles really well. And I mean, this gives you just about everything you could want out of the game. Sure, there's some purists that think the tank stick controls really were, the key to it. But, I mean, it plays the same either way with the joystick or with the arcade. It's just, slightly different controls, but the feel is there, and you're not sticking your face on that gross periscope-looking, shield. I remember playing this in Action Family Arcade in my town, and I don't know. I never thought of it then, but I can't imagine the amount of oils and grease were in that thing, so much better version for home. All right, now, looking at this, Carnival. When I was in 6th grade, I used to have to walk from school, across the street, and across the parking lot of a mall, the Lewiston Mall, to get back home because we had moved to a nice duplex behind there, and I was living one street behind a mall. It would take me 5 minutes to walk to the mall. So there was a Sears, and if you know Sears at the time, they had areas where they did tires and stuff. So they had an entryway, and in there they had Carnival. So once in a while, I would just stop off there, especially on a cold winter day, because it was about, a 10-minute walk for a little kid. It's not that far. But if it was freezing cold, I would pop in there to warm up for a little bit and just watch this. And once in a while, if I had a quarter, I'd play it. And I really did like Carnival. It was super fun because I could go in there and play for about 10, 15 minutes and warm right up for a quarter. And that was worth it. And how does this hold up compared to the arcade? Well, there's no bear. Where you'd get the bear as a in-between, bonus stage, and he'd go by, and then there'd be more bears, and they'd turn. Well, it doesn't have that, but that's not the core of the game. So this is 95% of the game. And while I missed that little bit with the bear, it really doesn't detract from how fun this is and how great it plays on the Atari. So here's another one where I would recommend getting the Atari version because it's just as fun as the arcade. All right, here we have Centipede, and this one is really tough to judge, and I'm going to say right from the start, nothing wrong with it. It plays great, but when you've played with a roller or a trackball, whatever you want to call it, it's hard to go back. But if you didn't have a trackball at home, this was more than adequate. I mean, yeah, the graphics are a little bit downscaled, but the gameplay is perfect. I mean, you know what everything represents. Those are mushrooms. That's your little player down there. Could they have worked a little bit more on it? Yeah, probably, but it's not that necessary. Again, another one where you're going to have just as much fun once you start playing at home as you did in the arcade. And the only thing that I would say is it takes a little bit of getting used to when you're controlling that, because it's kind of this thing like acceleration, where if you move to the left or right, as you hold longer, it moves a little faster. So it gives you that same kind of feeling as a trackball. So that's the only thing. Once you get used to that, again, another really solid arcade port on an early home console. I give this one a thumbs up. All right, so here we have Commando, and while this is kind of a valiant effort in a way, it almost seems like they could have done better. I don't think the sprites needed to be so fully fledged on this. I would have liked more enemies popping up and better control with the shooting, instead of what they kind of do here. The flicker makes it a little rough. I'm sure they could have done something better. Yeah, I just don't know. Those mounds aren't big. You just get hung up on them, and it doesn't quite give you the intense action of the arcade game. So this one, while it's kind of nice for what it was. And I guess if you never actually played Commando in the arcades, you might be happy with this, knowing it's just one of these kind of run and gun kind of arcade shooters. But other than that, I mean, knowing what I know, I used to play this in Aladdin's Castle arcade, and it just, I don't know, it's not comfortable. The pace just isn't right. The scale just doesn't feel right, and I'll have to say I'd skip this one if I were you. All right, now we're on to Crystal Castles, and if anyone remembers this, here's another one that I played mostly in Aladdin's Castle. So this one is another trackball, rollerball game, and it loses a lot of feel by not having that on the Atari 2600. If you could have a trackball, and I can't remember if this had trackball compatibility or not, I'd have to look that up. If it had that, it's definitely worth playing, but it's very frustrating to get your joystick to catch the angles, to get those the dots that Bentley Bear has to get. I don't know what you call him, what he's going after. I can't remember what his goal was for picking him up. It's just so difficult. Now, I'm not saying that it's a total deal breaker, because there's a nice amount of levels in this. It changes gameplay up and keeps it fresh. And then, you get the ladders, you get the elevators. So a lot of what's in the arcade game is here. Just knowing that makes me want to say it's still worth picking up. Once you get used to the controls of the joystick, if you ever do, I mean, I have a little trouble with it, but once you do, hey, this is a little gem. So take that for what it's worth. If it's something you want to try, and again, if you never played in the arcade, you might just love it, or you might just hate it. I'm not sure. Now we have Dig Dug, another one that I played often at Action Family Arcade. That was an arcade that was thrown in with a lot of, we had Laverdier's drugstores around here. So I didn't learn until many years later that they actually own the arcade. I thought it was just they were leasing them out to somebody, but Action Family Arcades were owned by Laverdier's. So it was a drugstore, a pretty big drugstore, one that had, some toys and it's more like a Walgreens or something now. But they're long gone, but they used to have the arcades right next to it. And this was in there, and I would walk. This was a long walk for me to get to Action Family Arcade, but I would walk down there. Probably took me a half hour or so to get there. And I would go in, and like I said, they had Battle Zone, they had this. I'm sure there were other games, and they just pop into my memory once in a while when I'm playing something. But if you wanted to get the feeling of Dig Dug at home, I don't know if they could have done much better than they did for the Atari here. I mean, it's got everything you want. You're digging through the ground. There's different levels. They change up the colors. They change the placement of the rocks. When you drop a couple rocks, you get the fruit or vegetable that drops out. It just has everything. You've got the Frygar and the Puka. Is that what the other guy's called? The one thing I don't like about this is when you're down to the last guy, he really takes off the screen fast. So you have got to plan to be up there. That's one of the things that's just a little different. And if you saw, I kind of walked through a rock, and that's not quite normal. And then occasionally those guys will drop through walls instead of being blocked by the barriers. But all in all, this was a really good home conversion for an Atari. I say it's worth picking up. All right, here we have Donkey Kong, for better or for worse. Now, this is a game that I played so often at the bowling alley. I would bowl every Saturday morning in league. My parents bowled in a couple of leagues, and sometimes I'd go there. And there was a time when my dad was even working at the bowling alley as the assistant manager. So Friday nights, quite often, I would hang out there. I'd watch Dukes of Hazzard at the bar on the TV. I would play video games. If I didn't have any money, I would just get some pencil and paper and just doodle the art on the side of the cabinets. And Donkey Kong for me was so well known. This kind of broke my heart when it came out. And I remember my brother had got a job. I was young, but he was just old enough to start working, and he had got a job, and he made some money. And we went to this store called Diorcy's that was in the mall next to us. And all three of us were there, me and my two brothers, and he was looking at it because they'd let you play the game first because they didn't want returns. So he was there, and he was playing the game, and he was just like, should we get this? Should we not? I didn't think he should get it. but he picked it up anyway, and we brought it home. And it's just devastating when you found out that there's only 2 levels, and it's not the programmer's fault. I mean, recently they just cleared it up where he had an interview and he was just like, "Look, this was the best we could do with the time we could do." And it was only because we had no time to build extra levels. They wanted it out. 2 levels, that was it. That's the storage you're getting. That's the end of the story. He could have done more levels, he said. He could have done more, but with the time constraints when they needed out, this was kind of like one of those ET things. It's like, you know what? This has to get out in time for the holiday season. So I say this is a big pass because just about every version out there, and again, not blaming the programmer. I think it was Gary Kitchen, but, correct me if I'm wrong, but every other game is better for Donkey Kong pretty much. So this is a pass for me. All right, here we have another game that's kind of like Commando, but if you were in the arcades, you remember Frontline had the little twisty knob on it or something, so you could aim that. See how that guy's little arm moves around? And as you moved your joystick, you could aim in any direction and shoot at while you're walking. So this really hampers the gameplay of this. And while playing it, after a few minutes, I got used to it, but I still didn't like it. And again, maybe that's because I knew how it used to play. Again, this was another one that was in the arcade right in the mall next to where we lived, Aladdin's Castle. And I didn't play it a lot. I didn't like these games, but I would play them because, you'd have your games you were good at, and then every once in a while you'd just, try something else to change things up and see if you ever kind of could get good at it. But this one, it was one where I probably played it maybe 30 times in my life in the arcade. And this just doesn't hold up well. I mean, for what they did with an Atari, this is pretty impressive. But you just can't capture the feel of what the arcade was. And again, people that never played the arcade game and like these kind of war game, games, these video games that were based off of war, where you could shoot grenades and shoot bullets and stuff. And then what's nice about this is they even had the tank component put in there. So that was impressive. But other than that, it feels a little flat. And you know what? Argue with me if you want. If you think this is fantastic, you tell me in the comments. But as far as I'm concerned, I just didn't care for it in the arcade, and I would care for it even less at home on the Atari 2600. So this one, again, is a pass, a hard pass for me. All right, now we are at Junior Pac-Man, and I have to say, this is a late game. This was put out really late by Atari, and I have to say that this is one of my favorites. It is fast, it is furious, and it is fun. Now, the downside is you're kind of zoomed in on this version, not just left and right, because it was designed to scroll side to side on here, but not up and down so much. So you kind of lose track of the ghosts. But having said that, it plays really well. It's just super hard, but it's hard in a way that you want to play again and again and get higher and higher. Now, if you're not good at it, the nice thing is as most games had multiple modes, you can turn off the ghosts in this. You can have 1, 2, 3, or the full 4 ghosts. But if you're having a lot of trouble and you're struggling with playing this and enjoying getting to more mazes, knock it down to 2 ghosts or 1 ghost even if you want to see everything. 3 is a pretty good challenge. 4 is super hard. But you know what? I love this. I played Junior Pac-Man in the arcades, and it was super fun in the arcades, and it is just as fun at home. It's just a shame that they sat on this for a couple extra years, I believe, because of the crash of the video game market, and it didn't come out till it was later, and I did not get a copy of this, until the 2000s somewhere. And once I got this, I was like, holy smokes, this could have been a big hit, especially if you compare it to the original Pac-Man. All right, here we have Frogger, and not much to say about Frogger. I mean, this is Frogger. It plays pretty good. Now, the only thing I can think of is that they do not have the otters. And I could be wrong, but I don't think the otters are in this game, the ones that would come up and grab you when you're on the log. But it's got everything else. It's got the snakes, it's got the alligators, it's got the fast pace of the cars getting faster. There's also the factor of, when you go to jump into little holes, the safe holes, sometimes there's a fly in there, alligators can pop out. And I mean, it controls really well. If you play the first game, it's just one jump at a time. If you play one of the later games, you can do multiple jumps. So I don't like the multiple jumps because it goes too fast. You just want to have that one jump at a time. So again, I know they made a better version of this for that cassette system they had, but all in all, this was really good. I think the only thing you're really missing is some of the music while playing the game, but I don't know. I'm good without it. If you like Frogger in the arcades, you're going to be 90+% happy with this game. So, Frogger, yeah, it's a definite buy if you want a good arcade conversion on an Atari 2600. All right, had to do a bonus one here. Jungle Hunt. What was it, Jungle King at one time? I think there was some deal where they couldn't call it that because maybe it wasn't Jungle King, but there were several names for this. There was Jungle Hunt, Jungle King. I think there was another name out there for it. There were different versions in the arcades. I could play this at just about any place. This was at the bowling alley. This was at the Dream Machine in our area. This was at Goliath's Arcade. It was in Aladdin's Castle. There was just and what's funny is depending on which arcade you went to, you might get one of those different versions of it. So it was kind of cool. I think the first one was because the guy looked like Tarzan. So the people from whatever movie company, they didn't want them using the Tarzan character. So you ended up with this guy with the pith hat. So either way, no matter which version you played, it was fun. And this is the way you make an arcade port on the Atari. A lot of arcade ports don't have all the screens, but they did. They put every screen on this. You get all 4 scenarios when you're playing Jungle Hunt. So you can't ask for more. The only thing I would ask for is try and not make the rock section so hard. But you know what? It could be hard in the arcade, that rock section. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth. It's probably fairly accurate on the difficulty level. But if you liked Jungle King or Jungle Hunt in the arcade, this would have thrilled you. And you know what? The Atari was competing with the arcade, and I think a lot of companies were like, we can't make our cartridges, even though we can make it pretty close in gameplay, graphics maybe not, but we can make it really close in gameplay. They didn't want to do that because they were probably afraid that the coin ops industry was going to be mad at them for putting this in the home and then ruining, all the arcades out there, which wasn't the case. People still went to the arcades like crazy, even during the big crash for home video games for a year or 2, maybe 3. What it really was this just enticed people. If you play this at home, this might entice you to actually play in the arcade, I think. And if you never played in an arcade, you may, get the desire to go check it out. But I don't know. It was a cutthroat industry, and everyone wanted to make their money. It was billions and billions of dollars back then. It was already bigger than the movie industry, so, everyone wanted their share, and they wanted to protect it. So, but if you want one of the best arcade ports on an Atari system, you can't go wrong with Jungle Hunt. And there we go. That's 10 plus 1. This one goes to 11. 11 arcade ports for the Atari, and there's many more. So let me know if you like this. I plan on doing a few more. These are all games that I own in either physical form or on some of the Atari systems, the home Atari plug and plays. I still strive to buy a few more in the collection. There's a couple of games out there that are super expensive that I'll never be able to get, like Tapper, but that's okay. At least I have quite a few on here just to have all those memories. And I was there. I was in the arcades and I was at home playing these games, and I can tell you what's what, what's good, and what's okay, and what really stinks. So if you like this, tune in. You can check out some of my other videos once in a while. There's lots of stuff from the past, you know, that you can look at. If you're getting tired of what YouTube's throwing at you, because they're pretty crappy with their algorithms for, you know, suggesting content to you, go ahead and check out my homepage and just browse through all those videos, and maybe you'll see something you like. So, hey, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. So long.